This video is sponsored by Sterling Insurance.
Well, welcome back to Van Conversion 101, the video series where we show you how to convert a van from start to finish.
In our last episode, we talked about planning and resources and whether or not you actually want to do van life. And today we're going to be talking about how to choose the perfect base vehicle for your conversion, as well as what to do when you're at a viewing, how to get it back, how to get it insured, all the kind of little things like that.
Before you start looking at vans, you'll hopefully have a rough idea of what you want to include in your van, which will determine what size of van you need. That being said, there are a number of good vans in a range of different sizes. So what else are you looking for in a van?
We know there are a lot of options out there and it can feel really overwhelming when you actually start to look for a vehicle, but there are a couple of things that you should definitely look out for. These include the size of the van, as mentioned, but also the reliability, availability of parts, and the average cost of a second-hand vehicle.
So here are a few examples of different size vans. You can pause the video to see what information that we looked at and what we think is important when buying a van. It also might be a good idea to look at owners forums. These are great for figuring out if there are any common issues with the make and model of van that you're looking at.
You should also try to get an idea of the average mileage that you can expect from a van, although bear in mind that that number will probably be skewed by scrappage schemes, which encourage owners to scrap older vans even if they're running fine. The majority of normal van owners will give up on a vehicle when it becomes too expensive to maintain, but your threshold for what's too expensive will probably go up if you've already spent £10,000 on a conversion.
Another thing that's really good to check out, as you can see on some of these examples, is the reliability index. We've put a link to the FM50, which is the UK's van reliability index. This shows the top 10 most reliable make and model of van.
Of course, take that with a pinch of salt. You never know exactly what van you're going to get, but it's a good idea. One of the examples we've used, which is the Peugeot Boxer, actually doesn't make the list this year, but from everything that we've heard, it is still a nice, reliable van and is used very commonly in conversions, so don't let this put you off too much. So this is the van that we opted for. It's a Ford Transit extra long wheelbase. We have a 2021 with 70,000 miles on the clock. It's got a 2-litre Euro 6 engine, which means it's exempt from ultra low emission zones and will do around 40 miles per gallon. The main reason for us choosing this van was its size. It's got a similar load space to the largest standard vans like the Sprinter and the Crafter, but it's actually a little bit easier to drive due to its relatively short wheelbase. And it's got a shorter front end as well, which means it's not quite as long overall. Yeah, these were all things that we found a little bit problematic with our Sprinter.
If you didn't know already, we converted a van back in 2021 and it was a Mercedes Sprinter long wheelbase. And like Will said, we loved her, but she was a little long.
We also did run into a few mechanical issues with our Sprinter, but I think that's mostly because it was pushing 200,000 miles. In general, we can't recommend the Sprinter enough. It is probably the most common large van for a conversion, with good reason. The only downside really is that they are more expensive than Transits, Boxers, Ducatos, all of those other ones.
And like not only just the van itself, but in terms of fixing things, the price for
like genuine Mercedes parts.
Yeah.
But if you've got the money to invest into a newer Sprinter, then that's definitely a good way to go.
Yeah. I think in an ideal world, we still would have liked to have a Mercedes Sprinter.
I think we just want to do something a little bit different as well. So if you found a van that you like the look of, it's a good idea to do some sketches to make sure that the load space of the van is big enough to include all of the components that you want. You can do this from a bird's eye view, and you can also do it from a side view. We're not saying you need to have the complete layout defined yet. We're going to be going into a bit more detail in this when we do a full design video. You definitely don't want to come home with the van you've just bought and find that you can't actually fit everything that you want inside of it. There are some ways around this. You can come up with some clever ideas. You can have a bed that folds away, for instance. If you're in a smaller van, you can have lots of storage drawers, maybe with a cooker that slides out. But this needs to be something that you're considering right from the start. This is an example that we did. This is the load space of our current van, which again is a Ford Transit. You can see here we're putting in some common elements like the shower, the fixed bed that we're going to include, and also making sure that we have enough room for kitchen countertop space, a sink, a fridge, a cooker, and a nice seating area as well. Again, this is not our final layout. We are going to be doing that in the design video, but hopefully this gives you a rough idea of the amount of space that you should leave for certain elements.
Where do you actually find your van? There are two possible options that you might be looking into. Either buying it completely brand new, which congratulations, because not many people can do that, or like us, buying it secondhand.
Yeah.
If you're buying it new, we're not really going to talk about that because you're probably just going to a dealership. You don't have to worry about things like the van breaking down as soon as you take it home and rust and stuff like that. So we're now going to talk about places you can buy secondhand vans and what to look out for if you're doing that. Truthfully, it might be a good idea to have several different make and model of van that you would be happy to go for, just because when you're looking secondhand, what's available very much determines what you're going to get as well.
If you're not pressed for time, then you can spend months scouring the market to find the perfect van. But if you do want to get it bought, then you might have to settle for your second favourite van, which has a really good deal on it.
Yeah. For example, when we were looking for this current van, we were looking at Sprinters, Transits and Crafters. There was a Crafter that we really liked, but in the end, this van was just a better deal. Where do you look for it? There are tons of different sites, but the ones that we would kind of stick to are Auto Trader, Facebook Marketplace, Gumtree, and eBay.
There are other good sites like the AA as well, but I think you'll find more dealership vans on there rather than private sellers.
Which means they'll probably be a bit more expensive. We're now going to talk about actually going and buying your van. Before we do, I just want to say we have a full van buying guide, which I'll link down below. It goes through all of the steps to buying your van, where you can buy it, basically everything that we're going to talk about here, but in a bit more detail. It also has a checklist that you can take to your viewing and actually check things off to make sure that the vehicle's okay. You can download that for free and the link will be in the description below.
When you're buying a second-hand van, there'll usually be two options. These are buying it through a private seller and buying it through a dealership. If you're buying through a dealership, then you are immediately covered by the Consumer Rights Act. What that means is if you notice any problems with the van that weren't disclosed, you can return it within 30 days for a full refund. This is not the case with a private seller, which means you need to be much more thorough when you're doing your vehicle checks.
And it basically means it's not refundable. Once you take it, it's yours, no matter what problems it has.
You will not be getting your money back if it breaks down on the way home.
Now that does sound really scary, but we have only bought vans from private sellers, and the reason for that is because they tend to be cheaper because there's no VAT on them.
Private sellers are also much more open to negotiation.
So basically what you're looking for is the best combination between age, mileage and cost.
This is of course going to be completely dependent on your budget. So if you're not looking to spend quite as much on your base vehicle, then you will be looking at options that are a little bit older or maybe have a higher mileage. There's also no hard and fast rule that says an older van with higher mileage should be cheaper. It's worth considering who you're buying from and how the van's been used. It might be a relatively old van, but it's only been owned by one person and has just been driven up and down the motorway. That's completely different to a newer van that has been driven around the city for several years.
Fleet vehicles are always good. Yeah, they're usually very well maintained. Some of them have even got limiters on them, which means like our one, for example, it only ever did 62 miles or something.
Per hour.
Yeah, it only ever did 62 miles per hour.
So yeah, you have to find that right balance of age, mileage and price.
We can't tell you what it is. It will be completely up to your budget and kind of what we've talked about. If you've done the planning and preparation and if you've done those little things that we've mentioned before, then you will already probably have that information.
Yeah, you just want to have a good scroll through all of those sites that we mentioned.
You can also put on notifications and just keep checking them every day because something good will come up, I promise you.
If you find a listing that you like the look of, there are a few things that you can do before you go to a viewing just to make sure you're not wasting your time.
The first thing that we'd recommend doing is doing a vehicle history and information check. This can be done through the government website and we'll leave a link to it down below. So it pulls up things like vehicle tax, its SORN status, so that basically means if the van has been legally taken off the road. It also has information on the MOT, when it's due its next MOT, if it failed or passed previous MOTs.
And also any advisories that are on the previous MOTs. These can be good indicators of what you might need to repair next. You can also get all of the general vehicle information on here, so things like the size of the vehicle, the engine size, horsepower, everything like that.
There's also another government link which brings up just MOT history, so I'll put that link down below as well. And then finally, obviously you're buying secondhand, which opens you up to scammers, unfortunately. So you don't have to do this every time, but if you're not sure and if you want to be a bit more cautious, you might want to run a check to see if it's been written off or stolen. There are a bunch of different sites that do this, but the one that we'd recommend is the AA site. Well, again, we'll put the link down below, but they charge a small fee and they can tell you this. When you get to the viewing, you'll probably have a quick conversation with the seller, and these are a couple of questions that you'll probably want to ask them. Do you have the logbook that shows the full MOT history? So you'll probably have already looked this up yourself, but it's always a good idea to ask this anyway. You can kind of gauge whether the seller's being truthful with you as well. if they do have this sort of stuff. Why are you selling it and what was it previously used for? Will kind of mentioned this before, but there is a difference between motorway miles and city miles. City miles can mean a lot of stopping and starting, which creates more wear and tear on the brakes. So yeah, that's just something else to look out for. And then heavy and light loads too. Obviously, heavy loads means more wear and tear on the vehicle as well. Have you had any issues with the vehicle? This is kind of self-explanatory. Do you know anything about the previous vehicle owners? Obviously, this is only relevant if the vehicle has had previous owners. Of course, all of this kind of hinges on if you actually trust the seller. If you're thinking that it's a little bit dodgy, then there's absolutely no harm in going home. It's much better to waste a little bit of your time than a lot of your money. At the end of the day, you're putting an entire home in the back of a van, so it needs to be the right one.
The next thing that you are going to do is a vehicle inspection. Now, if this is something that you're really not confident with, it might be a good idea to just pay a mechanic to come with you. The RAC offer a basic inspection for about £120, so this is a good option to make sure that you actually have a professional telling you this is an okay van, you should buy it. If not, then we are going to walk you through a few simple checks that you can do to make sure that the vehicle is in good working order. We decided to just do the inspections ourselves. That's for both of the vans that we've bought, and it's worked out okay so far. The first thing to do is just take a walk around the van and have a look at the exterior and the bodywork. The main things that you're going to be checking for are any dents and, most importantly, rust. We've gone for a slightly newer van this time, so there wasn't really any rust to look out for, but it's always good to have a proper check. If you do find any rusty patches, you can check the severity of the rust by pressing down on the affected area. If you can press in or you hear a cracking noise, then it might indicate that it's a deeper problem. Surface rust is generally okay and can be rectified quite easily. You should also do the same thing with the van's interior. Just have a look inside and make sure that there's no extensive rust problem. You also want to make sure that all of the doors are working and that all of the seals are good as well. You might also want to wear some scruffy clothes to the viewing, so you can have a proper look underneath and check out the chassis. Again, you're mainly looking for rust, but also any leaks. You can also see if there are any areas that have been repainted. This might be an indicator that there was some damage in the area. So if that is the case, you should definitely check that with the owner. You want to check out all of the tyres and the brakes. These are just consumables, so they're things that can be easily replaced, but it might be something that gives you a little bit of negotiating power when it comes to the price. For the tyres, you want to make sure that they're all in generally good condition and have adequate tread depth. Anything under about 3mm will need to be replaced soon. You also want to make sure that they are the correct size of tyre for the vehicle you're buying. You can also make sure that they're a reputable brand and that the brand of the front tyres matches the ones at the back. These are just all good indicators that the van has been looked after properly. It's a good idea to make sure that there is a spare wheel included too. For most vans, this is on the underside of the vehicle at the back. For the brakes, you're checking to see if the discs are pitted or scored at all. You want to make sure that the pads are not overly worn as well. Again, these are all just things that can help you negotiate a price. Looking under the bonnet is a really good way to check for leaks. The presence of leaks could be indicated by any kind of sludgy residue or oil or water where it shouldn't be. You also don't want to find an engine that is completely spotless, because that just indicates that the owner has cleaned it beforehand. Other good things to check are the levels of all of your fluids. Again, these are really just good indicators that the van has been well maintained. If you've got someone else with you as well, it's a good idea to have somebody watch the engine when you start it up from cold. If there's excess vibration or any funny noises, that might be an indication of a problem. When you're checking out the cab, you want to make sure that all the seatbelts are working properly, all of the windows, all of the door locks, as well as some less important things like the radio, aircon, all of the fans, your 12-volt electrics, that kind of thing. You can also just check out the general state of the upholstery. Okay, taking it for a test drive. This step is really important for making sure that everything is working properly. It's a good idea to try the van out on higher speed roads like a motorway or a dual carriageway, as well as in smaller areas. Before you do go on a test drive, make sure that you're insured with the owner's permission. Things to look out for. Before you actually set off, you can try all of the instruments, make sure that all of the lights and the signals are working as they should. Make sure that the steering is responsive with no play or excessive vibration. You should test out all of the gears, making sure that you can shift smoothly, and making sure that the bite point of the vehicle isn't too high either. This can be an indication of clutch wear. Try to get a feel for the brakes and the suspension as well. And throughout, you want to be making sure that there aren't any strange noises or any indications of smoke.
So you've bought a van. Congratulations! What do you do now and how do you actually get it home?
First of all, you need a driver's license. You need to be able to drive the van.
Actually, this is really funny because we didn't know any of this stuff when we first bought our van.
Well, we knew that part.
No, yeah, we didn't know that. But we didn't know any of the stuff that we're about to say before we bought our first van. So yeah, hopefully this helps you not make the same mistake we did.
Now that the van is yours, you have to be insured in order to drive it home. There are lots of good options here. I think we bought a policy from Temp Cover. You can do it for a number of hours just to get you home. And then you can sort out a proper insurance policy when you're there.
You need to sign your portion of the V5 document and also take a part of it. So there is a little slip that you have to take home with you to say that the van is legally yours. The previous owner of the van will send off their portion of the V5, and then you should get a proper V5 in the mail a couple of weeks later. It is also not possible to transfer road tax over. So once you've bought your van, you have to re-road tax it.
Now, we actually didn't do our road tax until the day after we brought our van home, but you should do it if you can. It just, if anything happens, if you get pulled over, you're not going to be in any trouble.
Yeah. And also it's really easy to do. We'll leave the link again down below, but it's just on the government website, and honestly it takes about 5 minutes.
Yep.
So another really important thing is you will obviously have insurance to drive your van back home, but you need to have insurance once you get home as well. The van needs to be insured because if anything happens, then that's a lot of money just down the drain.
It is really important to make sure that you've got an insurance policy even while you're converting the van. To make it easier for you to go and collect materials and, you know, keep the van in good shape while you're converting.
You're gonna hear this from us to no end, but we're with Sterling Insurance, who are also the sponsors of this video series. I know what you're thinking. They're only talking about it because they're sponsoring them, but they're genuinely a company that we really like, and we were actually with them before they started sponsoring us.
They're really the #1 choice for camper van insurance in the UK. They will cover all kinds of weird and wonderful conversions. They also do cover for extended travel in Europe.
Which is amazing because most other insurance companies don't do that.
Especially after Brexit.
Yeah.
The other good thing to mention is that they've got really excellent customer service. So if you're interested in getting a quote for your van conversion, go check out their website or speak to one of their advisors.
Anyway, so I think that's the end of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it and hopefully found it helpful. In the next episode, we're actually going to be stripping the van out and preparing it for the actual conversion process.
I, for one, am really excited to get stuck into something practical. I think that's the whole point that we did this video series, and I think it's going to be a lot more useful than us just talking at the camera.
Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. We always appreciate your support, and it's the reason why we can do this video series. So yeah, thank you so much. Anyway, bye!